It's my turn for a quote today. This is my quote. I'll read it first. This is from an early Sid audio. So it's from one of the very early recordings that I have a copy of. It's called Patience and Understanding. Never figure out that you know too much, yet know in the background somewhere that you know everything, but in the background. And if the background ever comes to the foreground, then you'll have what is called a realization or an insight into something deeper than you've ever had before. And the reason I picked that one was simply because it stopped. I was on a dog walk and I was listening to it, and it stopped me in my tracks. And the absolute simplicity of it really struck me. That what we do with our human minds is, this is how I see it, what we do with our human minds is we create a concept of time. So we create a future which is a little bit better, if not a lot, than where we are right now here today. And we think there's something we need to get from here to there. So the mind, the ego, whatever you want to call it, creates a concept of a before and an after and a future and a past. So it always creates opposites, right? So there's a future and a past. And then it tries to get to that future. It tries to figure out how to get to that future. That's just the nature of the human ego, is kind of what it does. And so we come to this conversation and we think that it's the other side of an insight, it's the other side of a realization, it's the other side of a new thought, it's in the next book, it's in the next audio, we need to gain some, need to have a thought we haven't had before, and we need to get that from somebody else. And if we could just get that insight, if we could just see more deeply, then we'd get it. And we know that's true because if we look to the past, which we're also making up with our minds, we can see that it's worked that way before, that our mind says, no, that's how it always works. Like you listen to John speak and then you get an insight, you listen to Sid or you read Sid and then you get an insight. That's how it works. You didn't know that thought creates experience, and then you listen to John and then you realize that thought creates experience. That was true in the past, therefore it must be true in the future. You felt better after that before, so in the future you will feel better if you just keep going, if you just, and we say just keep listening. And we think it's because there's something, we need to add more into the foreground of experience, and we don't see, like, that stopped me in my tracks because it made me realize from a coaching point of view and a human point of view, everything we're looking for is already there in the background. But it's so, I lived my whole life before I bumped into this conversation, again, an idea made through thought, but my whole life before coming to this conversation with no understanding of the fact there was even a background. My whole life was lived in the foreground, in the form, in the ideas, in the concepts, in the playing with the things and the relationships and the people and the businesses and the playing with form. And no, or a very quick brushing away of any idea of anything in this formless dimension. But the imagery that came to mind was so simple. No, there's this invisible, formless, whatever it is in the background, ever present, with no beginning and no end, just one. And every moment that thought falls away on this upper layer, it's the image that comes to mind. It's like it rises up and it allows itself to be known in the human experience. That's what an insight is. So an insight is as we fall out of thought, the wisdom that we are reveals itself to us. It comes to us, not in a better organization of the foreground or a better understanding of the foreground or a better conceptualization of the foreground or a better conceptualization of the background. it reveals itself to us in the moments the foreground dissipates.
Yeah.
But it's already there now. It's not the other side of the next audio or tape. It never has been. It's just been in those moments of quiet, in those moments of the good feeling we talked about last time. It reveals itself. Our true nature reveals itself, but it's always already present. It's the end to the search when you see that. That's why I think it's such a beautiful, simple thing.
Yeah, I mean, I love the way that this quote for me seems to follow on magically. It wasn't planned that way, but it seems to follow on from the one that I chose, because the other quote about sort of looking for a feeling, that's about seeing this spiritual side of ourselves that is always okay, that is ever present, that is never changing, and recognizing that that's always there before the noise of thought. It's in the background, not in the foreground in our thinking. It's in the background. And what I like about this quote is that it's pointing to the fact that not only is that space there, but that the background is what's doing life, right? I mean, I often sometimes with really busy clients, health clients, and they're really talking about, well, what about this and what about that and all this sort of stuff, and you can just see they have no sense, innocently, I was the same, they have no sense that whatever dilemma they're dealing with will be dealt with by this thing in the background. Call it whatever you want. And sometimes how I get them to reconnect with that is I'll just ask them, hey, put your hand on your heart and feel that beating away. Notice that is there and that something is doing that, right? But that something is not you or I in the foreground, not in the thinking. There's something there that is doing that. And so it's not just about recognizing that feeling and then starting to see, oh yeah, well, that's there. It's actually seeing, oh, this is the thing that does it all, right? If I'm going to do something with my life, well, something will come from the background to the foreground and I'll know, right? Not, oh, I'll go into the foreground and I'll figure it out and I'll drive myself crazy and then I'll get there. And then, like, no, that's noise. That's all old. That's not in the moment freshness. Like, what you're looking for is something that comes fresh in the moment from the team in the background that knows everything. And I say the team, well, it is actually the one energy behind life. It's this formless self.
We like the practical, like the ordinariness of this, right? We see this all the time. You go and have a cup of tea with your neighbor. You don't figure out before you go like what you're going to say and what you're going to talk about and whether you're going to, if they say this, you'll say this, and you'll say this, you'll say this, you'll say this. You rely on the background.
Yeah.
Coming up with the words, like the conversation somehow arises through you and words come out of your mouth.
That's right. Like even
come today, to you, and yeah.
I mean, like as I said to you when you said about the quote, I said, oh, I've read it. Like I haven't, and it's not, oh yeah, John, like he's full of himself. He thinks no, John doesn't know what he's going to say today. But what is different, what's so practically useful and helpful to me that I didn't know was that, oh, well, Nick's given me this quote. Apparently I need to say something about it. Well, I'll see what the background team have to say about that, because I'm pretty sure John's full of crap most of the time. And, that is what's helpful to me. It was also hard, though, because I was somebody that really was quite enamored with my foreground thinking team.
Yeah.
I thought my foreground thinking team had this life thing nailed. And, oh, yeah, you throw anything at me and I'll figure it out in my head. I'll do all of that. Well, I got sick.
When you're ill, like what? Yeah, and when you're ill, what a bunch of losers my front team are.
Well, yeah, that's right. That's what but
even you down.
The reason I spent so long in a hole sick was because I hadn't realized that the foreground team, right, they really don't know everything. And they use a lot of energy up, and they really batter the body up the more you're in all of that stuff. And so to begin to recognize that simple truth that there's something in the background that is quiet, that is still, that is not even in form, that brings things into form, that delivers you an insight, that delivers knowingness, that delivers an idea, that delivers a decision when it's required, when it's needed. And if there's nothing that's needed, well, good to know that that background is where my well-being is too. So I don't need to make a decision or get anywhere. I'm walking around as what I am more and more for the fact that I see that the background handles life.
But it's also I love conversations that I've had in the past with Dickon where he points to this, and this looks really, it's so simple, but it looks really true in this context. It's like all spiritual teachings point to the fact, point to like 3 steps, if you like, which is like we empty out, we fill back up, and then we give it away. And it seems to me that what happens is that when the background reveals itself to us through a thought or an insight or a realization, hey, there's a background, for example, right? Hey, there's a background. Like when we know that it's not an idea, but suddenly we realize that it's true, it's revealed to us. It's like a little bit of the background nudged up into consciousness and said, I'm here.
Yeah.
And that's probably why most people are here listening to this video right now, because at some point in their lives that happened. And we get like, holy shit, what was that, right? And we're like, what? There's a whole hidden realm down there, like what's that, right? And as soon as we look to see what is that just bumped me in the bum, right? It's like suddenly we get less compelled with this, because this is really boring. Like we've thought these thoughts a million times before. And as this gets so boring and we realize, because when you don't know there's anything else, what else would you think about apart from your thoughts? Like, what would you do all day? Of course, this is where the action is. And so when you realize there's something other than this gets less interesting, and we empty out. Like, this becomes just a blah 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 in the background, right? And it gets quieter, and there's more space between thought, and as there's more space between thought and there's more moments of quiet, more nudges from the underneath, right, come up and bump us, and we empty out, we fill up, like there's more room for nudges from the underneath. And as we fill up, what we fill up with is what's there in the background, which is wisdom, which is love and understanding, which is contentment, which is just the beauty of life itself, the essence of life, that thing that's beating your heart. And we fill up with the feeling of that. And then from that space, we get nudges in the world of form to like, go have a cup of tea with your neighbor, go cuddle your child, go create this type of business, go make your business bigger, go make it smaller, go take some medication, come off the medication, whatever. Right? But from this space of being full up with the background presencing itself into the world of form. And life in the world of form then gets more beautiful. Like, that's the transformation I want to help my clients see, not try and help them sort out the world of form so that they can have a better life. I want to help them become aware of the background. I want to point them in the direction of that, such that the background can make itself be known. Not so that the foreground can know the background, but it's much more passive than we think. It's like in the space, wisdom, the truth of, I love this, in the space that's revealed, the truth of the principles reveals itself to us. It's not that you have to figure it out with your mind, but the ever-present truth that's already there reveals itself to us, and it does it through a good feeling.
I mean, as you were talking then, the thing that came up for me, you were saying about how life becomes more beautiful. And I was thinking, how might people hear that? And I was thinking, well, many of us might think, oh, well, it'll get more beautiful in the form and more things will come to me, or I'll have better ideas about what to do and I'll get nicer stuff. And it's like, no, that does happen, but it's the recognition that your life could be exactly the same and yet your experience of it be far more beautiful for the fact that there is so much less on your mind as a result of the fact that you're now in touch with the background. You're seeing that the background is what's doing life. And to the other thing that you were saying about sort of experiencing more quietness is that it doesn't, this, what we're pointing to doesn't take away the fact that the mind will still make up thoughts and thinking. Like, the quietness doesn't mean suddenly radio silence, no thought. Right? Occasionally, very occasionally in my life have I had moments like that, but they're probably countable on one hand. You know, for the majority of the time, there's something rabbiting on in my head about something. But there is quiet for the fact that I'm not listening to it. You know, it's like there's all sorts of noise going. I can hear Max and Layla and birds and dogs and cats and all sorts of stuff at the moment, but I'm not thinking about any of that stuff as in bothered by it or needing to do something with it. It's sort of in the background now because I see it's an irrelevance. It's not something I need to do something with.
You know what the difference is? That makes me laugh. Right, your kids are shouting in the background. You're not even hearing them. I had to go and tell my son to shut up just before we started recording this because it was too distracting. I was totally distracted by that, and I'm thinking like I'm going to be able to hear it on the video. It's going to ruin the sound quality. But because of that, I'm more distracted by that. I feel like I have to have that gone in order to be present. And what would that said? That is the difference, right? The difference between being compelled by the foreground, feeling like you need to sort that out first, and the being okay with the noise going on around you because like you're not even hearing it because you're in touch with the quiet presence that already is there anyway.
Yeah, but I love the humanness in that, Nick, because I think also it brings us to something else, which is, look, we have this deeper spiritual side to who we are, but we live this human experience. And sometimes the human experience is, oh, Ned, you're making a real racket. And, you know, you don't see that for what it is. It looks to you like that's a problem in the moment. And so in that moment, whilst it looks true, it's okay for you to cope. So you go tell Ned, look, be quiet, I'm busy, or go and do your thing elsewhere. Like, this is another thing that I see with people is that they hear the content of other people's insights, and then they think they should be getting that and applying it, and you know, before they've seen it for themselves.
Yeah.
So, you know, it actually becomes a source of suffering for them because they go, oh, well, yeah, this well-being's inside of me because I heard it on a 3 Principles talk and somebody pointed me to it. And then they're getting annoyed by the circumstances of their life. And rather than just allowing themselves to be where they are and doing what makes sense to them in that moment, they end up in this space of suffering because they're now going, oh, well, this thing's really annoying me, but Nick Bird or John L. Mokadem said that thought creates my experience and not that thing. So I shouldn't really be doing that thing to try and cope with it. And now they're trying to, battle themselves into the insight that somebody else gave them, but they don't see it for themselves.
Yeah.
So, you know, I mean, somebody asked me the other day, they said, John, what do you make of like trauma being in the body? And is it something that I need to go and process and do something about? And I said, well, I'm going to answer you 2 ways. I said, from my perspective and from where I'm sitting, it looks to me like anything I try and do in my mind to fix and process emotion or reactions or anything like that, that seems to exacerbate it. But I said, I say that to you, having spent years and years and years trying to do something about my experience and, you know, how I felt. So that was my insight, right? And I said, now it could be useful to you that I share my insight to you, but that might drive you mad. And I said, if you get this part of you that is compelled to go and do something about what you see as trauma in your body. Well, you should do that. Don't listen to me. Go do what makes sense to you from your own background team, right? Because that's what's right for you. If you take on my insight and you see it, you'll just suffer for it.
Yeah, but
And
how
I
do I know
think
if it's John? How do I know if it's thought or wisdom? How do I know if it's the foreground or the background telling me to go investigate the body, John? How do I know that? Is it thought? Is
it's
it?
really it's really simple, right? If you find yourself moved to go and do something, then it's right for you. If you don't, it's just a load of thinking.
Yeah.
It's that simple to me. I don't know, right now, at some point, I know I'm going to go to the bathroom, right? I'm not going to think about that. Like, the point at which I go is the point at which it's time. I don't need to discern if my thinking about going to the toilet is wisdom right now or not, because at some point I know I'll be moved to do it. That's the thing. It's not something you figure out. That the background informs what you do, not the foreground thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Again, the thing that keeps coming to mind is just going back to the fact that everything that the principles is pointing to, everything this conversation is pointing to, is already present. It's like this is too much personification, but it's not the right word, but it's like it's not waiting, because waiting implies time, but it's waiting its potential. It's waiting to reveal itself to you in the moment that you stop trying. Like, I see that for my clients, the hardest bit of the journey is the biggest moment of the journey is what was that just bumped me in the bum, right? Like the background presencing itself and capturing your attention. Huh? Yeah. What's that? There's something here. That's it. You don't need to get involved after that moment, because the journey, like not the journey, but the revealing of the truth has already begun. That thing is more powerful than you or I. And it will keep, despite your best efforts to think about it, despite your best efforts to try and understand it, it's relentless in its making itself known. And you can either fight against it by thinking about it a lot, or you can sink into the giving up of thought, if you realize that. And everything that you think that you're trying to understand about the principles is already there, waiting to show itself in your consciousness, waiting to reveal itself through an insight. And an insight isn't another thought you haven't, it is a thought you haven't thought before, but it's a simple truth that's already in existence that lets itself be known about, gosh, thought creates experience, for example. Wow, consciousness is the thing that like enlivens a thought. There is something deeper than just this foreground. Like that is the truth of the principles revealing itself to you. The feeling of deep, impersonal, profound love is the background revealing itself to you. It's already there, just for the seeing of it. It's just for the seeing of it. Like, it's already there. It's like it's invisible. I'll tell you what it's like. It's like invisible. It's written invisibly on a piece of paper. And every now and again, words become, sounds very Harry Potterish, but like become visible just at the perfect moment. Not on your time scale. The perfect moment, the words on it become visible, and the rest remains invisible. But you only need, Sid always points to, you only need one realization to change your life forever. And if you just stop, if you just freaking stop, the developing paper like has time to do its work, you know? It's like it's already there, written on the paper. but for the busy scurrying around trying to figure out how to make invisible ink become visible.
Yeah. So if someone's listening to this and they've had a moment where they've just felt themselves drop, right? So they've dropped into a deeper place. It's worth getting them to look and just go, hey, what was behind that? Was it because of what Nick said, or because of what John said, or you got an insight or whatever? Or was it just that in that moment you gave up? You just stopped for a moment. You stopped trying. You stopped trying to figure something out. Like, that's what we're pointing to, right? It's not, oh, well, that 5 minutes into this, Nick Bird said this, so I'm going to keep listening to that over and over again. And it's like, no, because now it's turned into a thinking thing, right? I mean, I don't know if you see this, Nick, but I get people who come to me and they've been touched by this conversation and they drop into this place, and then slowly they start to lose it and they start seeking it again, and it becomes more and more elusive. And you've got to kind of help them recognize, no, the space you dropped into was not one that was made of you trying. It was made of you not trying, right? It was when you gave up. So to get people to look towards that, hey, you drop into this when you give up. And it isn't because of what we said. It's just in that moment, you stopped.
Well, it's the truth of the principles revealing itself to you in the moment,
Yeah.
a deeper knowing, that quiet thing that beats your heart,
Mm-hmm.
drop thought for you.
That's it. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Good catch.
You
Because
can't recreate that.
oh, that's right.
You can't, that's the job at the background, right?
Yeah.
Like, not on your time schedule.
Yeah.
But it's important that you understand what happened.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you do think it's in the words. You do think it's in the teaching. You do think it's in the words that have been said. You don't realize that the background dropped thought on your behalf.
That's it.
Like, it's not possible for you to do. We've talked about this before. You've got a background for that. It does that for you. So I just want to read the quote one more time before we wrap up on this one, just for reflection, really, given what we've spoken about. Never figure out that you know too much, yet know in the background somewhere that you know everything, but in the background. And if the background ever comes to the foreground, then you'll have what is called a realization or an insight into something deeper than you've ever had before. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. That was fun.